Okay, so we have a bit of an in-depth video. We all love a little bit of Elden Ring, and our good guy over at the Vati video side has made an in-depth analysis of the Elden Ring Shadow of the Erdtree trailer, which I told you he would. Because if nothing more, Souls-like content creators are as predictable as mud. The second something new comes out, they will scour every trailer to make a 50-minute video, infinitely decoding everything there is to see about it. I'm gonna skip the part where it just plays the trailer because we've already done a react to that, and I am nothing if not a multi-shameless shill that will advertise my other content. So go watch my breakdown of the Shadow of the Erdtree, which will be linked probably somewhere on screen, and let's just jump straight to the end of it.
And travel to the realm of shadow.
Make sure to go watch and like the original content as well, guys. We always got to give love to the original creators here. We are but scum who enjoy supping upon the leftover slop.
I'm going to highlight what I think are 3 of the biggest gameplay details that I found hidden in some translated interviews. First, Elden Ring's DLC will actually feature a new power scaling feature that will come into play while you're in the Land of Shadow.
So the Land of Shadow. So I made a prediction thinking that this would be like a parallel dimension kind of thing. Him saying Shadow Realm makes me think this is probably just a parallel dimension of the Land Between, or wherever it is we are in. Yeah, that place. Interesting. Okay.
Here, our character will be able to upgrade their attack power in a way that is separate from your rune level. Let me explain that. So, Miyazaki mentions that this system is somewhat similar to how attack power works in Sekiro. In Sekiro, you don't level attributes to do more damage.
That's actually like, okay, think about it this way, right? That's it's a smart way to compartmentalize the DLC so that people who don't have the DLC aren't considered overpowered by the comparison to people who do. Because here would be the problem, right? Is that if you make the DLC and you make it there are things that are infinitely stronger in the DLC than outside of it, the only way you'd be able to make it so that people could actually contend with the DLC that's harder is by letting people level up naturally. But by compartmentalizing it, you make it so that the people who aren't at that stage yet are still relatively in the same spectrum as the people who are. It's an interesting game development method that allows you to keep things on a level plane, whilst making it so that the stuff that you're doing that's harder is kept to its own little paradigm. That's interesting. I like that idea.
You would do in Elden Ring. Instead, your attack power can be raised by defeating certain bosses.
It's interesting to see a Sekiro element coming into this.
So, a system like this is being added to Elden Ring, and it will be a new way to get stronger in the DLC.
Yeah, I don't think anything other than Sekiro's ever done it, so it'd be interesting to in a Souls-like game.
The reason this is being added is because From Software know that there are a lot of players who will be going into the DLC at high levels with their completed characters. And so instead of having players with completed characters just steamrolling the content, they want players to have that classic experience of struggling against bosses.
Yes, this is what I said, right? Because I can guarantee you what's going to happen is everything. I made this prediction when we watched the trailer. I guarantee you everything that's going to be in this DLC is going to be absurdly hard. So you have to be able to make use of what's in the DLC to be able to beat the DLC. It's a way of balancing that makes it fair for everybody.
To try again. So
and levels the playing field.
Adding a new
incentivizes newer players, but doesn't necessarily punish the stronger players. It just makes it equal.
I think this idea could be genius, and it's especially important for a game like Elden Ring to have this, because this game will live or die by the enormous, expansive world it has, and you need to want or need.
I think, to be fair as well, something that needs to be said is it's a sign of genius for the sake of trying something different and not just doing the same thing. Like, this DLC is huge by the looks of it. So adding in this element of scaling means there's more of a nuance to how the leveling works. It normalizes the game for everybody. And yes, there are absolutely going to be people who complain about this kind of stuff. There will be, but those are the 2%ers who know life these games, who only care about min-max, and who aren't playing it for fun, who are just playing it because that's their entire existence and IP.
Next,
But it's a
of
smart
course,
and a
the
very
DLC
interesting
will be
take
getting many
and
new
daring, and I
weapons,
love the fact
but
they're trying to be different.
Most interesting is that these new weapons span.
Because like this goes into a different subject, and I'll briefly mention it. But what is the death of any type, any style of game, right? Think of battle royales, stagnation. The thing that killed battle royales was stagnation. The only game that really stuck around was Fortnite because they innovated, they tried different things, they changed the dynamic of the battle royale. Shadow of the Erdtree is doing the exact same thing. When we think of a Souls-like, usually any game that comes out that is a Souls-like follows the exact same mechanisms of every Souls-like that's come before it. So of course, it makes sense that From Software are the ones innovating to try and keep the Souls-like genre and chemistry fresh. Because if you just did the same thing, you know, it'd be more of the same, but it wouldn't be new and fresh. You wouldn't have anything to make you feel like you're trying something different. It's just more, and you know, more of the same is great. But by innovating, you open it up potentially to more people to try something new, and keeps things fresh, keeps things, you know, from stagnating.
8 new weapon categories. Elden Ring already had a ton of weapon types, so getting 8 more is actually kind of insane. So far, we know 6 of these new categories. One is the dueling shield, which combines
Oh, it's a shield! I thought it was a
defense.
razor blade.
Another are these reverse grip swords that we see being
Oh,
wielded.
dude, I didn't even notice that originally! I didn't realize they were reverse grip. Dude, that's some Naruto shit right there. I love the idea of reverse grip weapons. There's nothing more anime.
This clip. And then there's weapons that enable a martial arts style, reminiscent
That's gonna be so
of the
cool.
Dragon Bone Fist from Dark
Go
Souls 2,
Ip Man, Jackie
or
Chan
Senpo
on
monks
people's asses.
from Sekiro. Miyazaki also mentions
you know there are going to be people who use these martial arts weapons to go back and kill Melania, to dunk on them, and then using them to kill regular players to just be like, you may have weapon, but I know kung fu. And that's what this DLC will do as well. This DLC offering all the new weapons and styles means that people can go back and play the original game again with all these new styles and have a completely fresh experience. That's what makes Souls-like games amazing. It's not about how strong you are, it's about the style you're allowed to play. It's that power fantasy. Every time you put a new style of weapon in the game, it makes every bit of content that came before replayable and infinitely more, makes the rest of the game even more valuable in terms of how much time you're willing to dedicate to play it through that style. So I love to see, like, From Software know this. From Software know that it's style over fluff. More style equals more time to spend and more time to be enraptured in it.
Or the Senpo monks from Sekiro.
That's one of the biggest
Miyazaki
things
also
about
mentions
Souls games is how you interpret the game.
Sword and a new large sword, whatever that means. But
Hey, Buzzling.
personally, I'm most excited for these. These are equipable throwing weapons where all of your melee attacks
I thought that was just a use item.
Attacks. Elden Ring always had
That's
really
kinda cool.
smooth ranged gameplay, but the weapons were so bad that it just wasn't worth
I've never
playing.
unironically
So
used a
I really hope these
ranged
are
weapon in a
viable.
Souls game.
Anyway, the third gameplay point I want to mention is that, again, Miyazaki says that the DLC area should be at least the same size as Limgrave. But you need to bear in mind, this is coming from the same humble man who told everyone that Elden Ring would take about 30 hours to complete. So,
Miyazaki, you are full of shit. Yeah, methinks that this is probably going to be... Yeah, it may be the same size in terms of square footage, but we're talking about verticality here as well. I would like to think that he says Limgrave, but he doesn't mention the underside. It's going to be bigger. It's going to be way bigger than Limgrave. I can guarantee you that. I mean, even from the scope of what we saw in the trailer, this place looks huge. I think it is certainly going to be bigger than Limgrave, without doubt.
New categories. Bad that it just wasn't worth playing. Coming from the same humble man who told everyone that Elden Ring would take about 30 hours to complete.
My first playthrough took about 50 or 60, I can't remember.
If Miyazaki is underselling the size of the DLC here, if anything. But that's enough about gameplay for now. Let's talk lore.
That's not to mention then
Shortly
overlapping
after
areas
the
as well.
DLC trailer released, I received
Because
an
they
email
have a
from
tendency
Namco
to
Bandai
change
about
areas
it,
to make them
and
updated for
they
later
included
content.
this short poem. It reads, "The land of shadow, a place obscured by the Erdtree, where the goddess Marica first
So
set
I think
foot,
this is all going to be about
a
Marica,
land
right?
purged in an unsung battle.
I still wonder how we're going to
set
get into the
ablaze by
DLC.
Messmer's flame. It was to this land that Miquella departed, divesting himself of his flesh, his strength, his lineage, of all things golden. And now Miquella awaits the return of his promised lord." Let's break that down, starting with the Land of Shadow. According to interviews with Miyazaki, the Land of Shadow is a place that has become physically disconnected from the Lands Between. So this isn't an alternate version of the Lands Between, nor does it seem like we'll be going backwards or forwards in time to access the DLC for once. And that is refreshing compared to past From Software DLC.
That is some Studio Ghibli looking stuff right there. You guys know what I mean, right? You remember the little tree spirits from the Wolf Princess? Oh no, Princess Mononoke. That is some very Studio Ghibli stuff with a bit of Game of Thrones guy.
I am excited for a DLC that will expand on the present world.
Look at the little arms! Look at the little arms!
Past or future world. That said, if anything, the Land of Shadow will definitely contain many remnants of the past, as it is a place obscured by the Erdtree, where the goddess Marica first set foot. If this place...
I almost had this, like, idea in my head that it's like a pocket dimension, right? Like, something along the lines of the shadow of the Erdtree creates this, like, pocket that once you get into it, it expands the entire area. Like, if you looked at it as in, like, the whole tree, right? So if this was the tree, the shadow sort of covered this one area, and that entire section got sucked into a little vacuum. So then anyone that would be going from this lower part to here would just skip right through it and end up here. So I think it's going to almost unlock this, like, little section of the island that was completely taken away from the sort of normal plane, as it were.
This can be obscured simply because the Erdtree exists. Then I lean towards thinking that this might have always been some sort of shadowy dimension, rather than
that's what I
once
thought.
physically being a part of the Lands Between landmass. Although
It's
there
the
is
shadow
a
of the
nicely
Erdtree.
sized gap right in the middle of the Lands Between where this might fit. But I think the Erdtree does generate a ton of light, so the idea of a Land of Shadow being obscured.
Yes, this is what I was saying.
Kind of makes a lot of sense.
Am I
As for
as
why
smart
this place became
as Vatividia?
obscured by the Erdtree, I
Not
think
the slightest,
we
but
can
still.
lay the blame squarely
I
at
like
the
to think
feet
that I have
of
some
Marica,
sentiment of knowing in this
since
kind of
the
stuff.
age of the Erdtree is her age, after all. And
Should we watch more
this
Vatividia,
age
by the way, at
only
some
came
point?
about
That's something you
when
guys like to see
she
me
ascended to godhood
react to.
and became the vessel.
I do
of
love
the
Elden Ring and Souls-like lore.
The biggest part that's always been missing from Marica's story is what happened before.
It's very fitting considering
she
of our
became
recent
a
Let's
god.
Play of Dark Souls 3 with
Shadow
Zero
of the
Vigor.
Erdtree seems to hide the answers to that exact question, since the poem calls the Land of Shadow the place where the goddess Marica first set foot. Marica setting foot in this place.
Yeah, that
before
makes me
setting
think
foot
that the entirety of this... Because if we think about it, right, the entire thing is light, so it casts no shadow. So if there was a shadow, where would that shadow be? I think there's going to be a big sentiment on shadow and dichotomy. I think a big sentiment is going to be elements of the shadow of the Erdtree is hidden. So if you find the shadow, you find this lost land. That kind of sentiment.
in the Lands Between makes a lot of sense, because we've always known that Marica isn't from the Lands Between. She's a part of the Newman race, and the Newman are said to have come from outside the Lands Between. The character creator calls the Newman supposed descendants of denizens of another world. So
That's the Dark Souls reference. That's the Dark Souls reference. These are embered. These are cinders. These are the inhabitants of the Dark Souls universe. This is how they tie it in. This is how we're going to find out that Dark Souls is actually connected to Elden Ring. We figured it out. That's it, guys. Elden Ring is officially Dark Souls 4. Imagine,
Either this other
right?
world is the Land of Shadow, and Marica
Would explain why fucking
originates
Patches
from
keeps
there,
coming back.
or Marica comes from somewhere outside the Lands Between and outside the Land of Shadow, but simply set foot in the Land of Shadow before venturing to the Lands Between. Either interpretation could be true at this point, I think. At any rate, it seems like the Land of Shadows is extremely important to Marica's past. Miyazaki drops a huge detail on that note, stating that the Land of Shadows is the place where Marica became a god, and the golden tree was born.
And
I can't...
maybe I need to watch the other Elden Ring lore videos again. But isn't the Erdtree kind of designed as like a parasite kind of thing that grew out and sucked the energy of what was there before? Like this whole like subversion of expectations, the thing that is the bastion of light and shines down upon the entire land is actually more of just a leech than anything else? Or am I misinterpreting that? I remember somebody reading and seeing that somewhere.
Wait for the DLC to elaborate on those circumstances. When Marica did claim the Elden Ring, her most significant act was removing the Rune of Death from it. Afterwards, many previous cultures of death were rendered obsolete, as souls were now supposed to return to the Erdtree. So, if souls started to return to the Erdtree, where they were presumably reborn, where were souls going before that? Now,
good point.
This is just speculation, but is it possible souls once went to the Land of Shadow? Could the Land of Shadow once have been sort of
are they pulling a World of
afterlife?
Warcraft?
As evidence
Shadowlands
for
all
this
over again?
claim, consider that A. Miquella only managed to depart to the Land of Shadow when he died.
If this is the path they're going, they have to be very careful. World of Warcraft has proven time and time again how easy it is to tell a story about the realm of death poorly. We need only look at their telling of Shadowlands to show how bad dealing with the afterlife can be as a story narrative, or as a storytelling progenitor. So I hope they don't get too lost in the weeds, because the last thing I would want to see is another Shadowlands.
Divested himself of his grace and his flesh, so his death led to him being here. Next, trailer dialogue explains that those stripped of the grace of gold shall all meet death in the embrace of Messmer's flame. So those who are stripped of the grace of gold have to meet death in this place. And the last bit of evidence for this speculation is that there already is a shadowy realm of death alluded to in Elden Ring lore, called the Helfen. So, since we know that the Erdtree disrupted...
Oh, yes! No, I remember, because that's what that stupid-ass big bird skull face mother trucker... I don't remember where it is. There's a boss in one of the snowy areas that looks like a giant bird with a skull face, and it uses Helfen abilities, and I remember seeing this originally, I thought to myself, damn, that's so it's completely out of place. It has no, like, cohesion with any other, like, design theory of any of the other bosses, and it kind of makes sense. So that's kind of what they're, like, pushing on, I guess. Just, like, how some of that shadow bleeds through into the Lands Between kind of thing.
Previous cycles of death in the Lands Between, it definitely makes sense to me that the Erdtree might obscure the Land of Shadow beyond just being a bright source of light.
It has a shadow, but you can't see it.
Might have replaced its existence as a sort of afterlife. But I could definitely be wrong on the afterlife stuff, so let me know what you think. At any rate, the Land of Shadow has now become relevant.
Like it's in its own pocket dimension kind of thing.
The Tarnished have found a way to enter this forsaken
But how?
place.
How do they enter? I want to
The poem
know.
goes on to read, a land purged in an unsung battle, set ablaze by Messmer's flame. I interpret this as the land was purged in an unsung battle, and then it was set ablaze by Messmer's flame. These seem to be two separate things. So first, let's talk about the war, the unsung battle. In an interview, Miyazaki references the war when he was asked
just as a thing, one of these days, we're going to get a Souls game that's going to have an area that is not inhabited by maniacal eldritch abominations, that is actually a nice place that has friendly NPCs, that doesn't make you question your life choices, and actually may be kind of cozy to be in. Because damn.
This Wicker Man enemy, and replies, "So this giant basket of flame was a terrible, gruesome weapon used in a war that occurred in the Land of Shadow. The kindling that you see is actually the remains of bodies that were put in there to burn. As for whose enemies were put inside the Wicker Man, I'd wager that it was Marica's enemies, since she's the one who came out victorious as a god, and with the golden tree as well. Just speculation, though." Zully the Witch points
so
out
this
that the
episode's
Wicker
game must
Man
have a big ass
traces its
swamp in it.
origins back to
Swamps are as mandatory in Souls games as sewer levels are to every first-person shooter that exists.
Celtic myth, where people were allegedly sacrificed within
That's
a
what I
wicker
thought it was.
statue.
It reminded me so much of the Wicker Man.
Pointed out that this design may have instead been drawn from Berserk.
Oh.
They were never saints. They just happened.
Guys, I really hate to upset you all. I've never watched Berserk. Even though its theme tune slaps.
To be on the losing side
Not
of
the
a war.
bees!
If you look closely, you can actually see a mane of red hair attached around a face on the Wicker Man's upper.
So that's actually something I've noticed. There's a lot of enemies in Elden Ring that utilize this like long flowing red hair as a signifier of power. Radahn, Melania, her servants. And I know that it is just a simple ideology, but I think that the way Miyazaki's designed it is that anything that is pertaining to this red flowy hair, this red mane, is to signify power. Anything that is red is power. And you can notice that with the Fire Giant, Melania, her warriors. Most of the big bads that pertain to a certain theme all share that in common. Which I think is pretty cool. It's really, Miyazaki really knows how to tell story and to help you analyze things just through diegetic storytelling.
Thighs, red hair like this.
Yes! What did I say? What did I say? I'm not saying that I'm really good with cinematography and film theory and game theory, but this is my area of expertise. I am great at analysis. I'm great at analytics. I'm great at analyzing things and understanding how it correlates to storytelling. And Miyazaki has always shown his pertinence towards understanding color theory and counterbalancing colors. When you go to one area, the complementary colors and the counterbalance colors always push back. Like, you go to an area that's obscenely green and dark and grim, and all of a sudden you'll have, like, blues and very primary colors sticking out. Or you go to, the white area where the Fire Giant is. All of a sudden, the reds really stick out. The oranges, the browns. It becomes very much... There's always one underlying key color that's complemented by something else. And the way Miyazaki does his integral storytelling is that he tells the importance of characters of power through color. Every character in Elden Ring especially, and it's present in his other games as well, but every character that is of importance and power has some big element of redness in their color design. With a few exceptions here or there for thematics, I know, but it's compelling and it helps you understand what is important and discern that, oh wait, this thing's going to be strong.
Is referenced in
and maybe there's some relativity to something else, you know? Like having the mane of hair there kind of says, this is going to be a big bitch.
have despised his own red light.
Let me just back that up a little bit.
Red of you, and many other users have pointed out
Cheers,
that this design may have.
All I'm getting is pre-watch. Shut the fuck! This is not pre-watched. I am just smart, okay? I am smart.
To be on the losing side of a war.
You could shut up. I am big smart. This is my area of expertise. There are some things I'm allowed to be smart with.
Face on the Wicker Man's upper thighs. Red hair like this is referenced in the giant's red braid, which reads, "Every giant is red of hair, and Radagon was said to have despised his own red locks. Perhaps that was a curse of their kind. Incidentally, the red hair here is just one of many symbols in the trailer that are considered blasphemous over in the lands between. Omen horns, for example, are another
Still the least horny furry.
such symbol of despised beings under the Golden Order, and Omen horns are seen here on the Wicker Man, here upon the Lion Dancer,
Actually,
here on
that
these
is something
enemies.
I noticed in the trailer, was that there were a lot of characters with absurd amounts of horns. I feel like horns in Elden Ring are to reference corruption, sloth, and just like, I'd say corruption is like the best thing, but stagnation, grimace, negativity. It's to signify a fall from grace. And I think when you see things that are like infected, you know, things that are to pertain to having been transformed into something disgusting, that sort of pushes the element of something that was one thing that is now something else. Horns are a sign of corruption.
Even upon the roaring rune bear thing, which also has that red hair.
Oh yeah.
And then there's this hippo thing
that thing gives me really creepy vibes.
Using an aspect of the crucible, which were also aspects that became despised and scorned. And then there's a spirit wielding the iron cleaver that's the signature weapon of the misbegotten, who were also
God, he's making so many
despised.
connections.
So lots of blasphemy.
Also, I've always thought, and this again really proves Miyazaki's tendency towards leaning on anime, these things look like the Titans from Attack on Titan. You can see it, right?
So lots of blasphemous symbols going on, but no character in the DLC has as many of them as Messmer, who is the character that is at the heart of the Shadow of the Erdtree DLC, maybe even more so than Miquella.
Wait, Messmer?
This is the demigod who would set ablaze
Not Melania's
the land
brother?
of Shadow.
Mother,
Oh.
wouldst thou truly lordship sanction in one so
Aaron.
bereft of light?
So this
Great
is
voice
Messmer,
actor as well.
and the mother he mentions is Queen Marica.
Oh.
An official interview makes this quite clear. To quote Miyazaki, and you may have seen at the end of the trailer, there was this piece of key art where it shows Messmer sat in this throne-like chair, and people who've played the game may recognize this throne to be one of those from the boss room where you
Oh
battle
shit, it
Morgoth.
is!
And this represents the thrones at the base of the Erdtree, and it's supposed to symbolize
I wonder if there's going to be a DLC for each of the chairs. And to get to the DLC, we have to sit in the chair. Like this entire area where you fight what's his face, Radagon? The guy with the lion on his back. This seems like a pretty pivotal area as like a hub as to where you'd get to DLC. It's at a point where you would have to be pretty late in the game anyway. And it would make sense that this would be where you'd travel from, because after beating the final boss, you'd come down from the Erdtree and be here. So to go from there to the DLC would be pretty cyclical.
room where you
It makes
battle
sense in my head.
Morgoth, and this represents the thrones at the base of the Erdtree, and it's supposed to symbolize that Messmer stands on equal footing to these other demigods and children of Marica who sat around in these thrones and held the rooms of the Erdtree. So he is an important figure who rivals these other demigods.
Makes me wonder how long
And
they're
as you
planning
play
on
the
milking
DLC,
Elden Ring for before
you
they
will
make
learn
something
a little
else.
about why he wasn't featured in the Legends of the Erdtree, the Lands Between. You'll realize why he exists in this shadow, this land of shadow. As to who Messmer's father is, well, there are many signs that they're a product of Radagon. For one, there's the red hair.
Okay.
And then there's the fact that Messmer's name starts with M, which suits the naming convention for the children of Marica.
No, but I mean, how
who
long
are
they're
Miquella,
going to end up milking
Melania,
before Buzzling,
and
like until they make something
possibly
else.
Melina. Speaking of Melina.
Oh yeah, Melina's
we've-
got those like locks as well. Somebody mentioned this when we watched the trailer originally. Also, the naming convention as well. Melina, Miquella, Melania. Interesting. Also, anyone else notice how she's got like the eye tattoo? And it really makes me think of the tattoo from Final Fantasy 16 that all of the mages wear to signify that they are disgusting vermin. Just a thought.
Talked many times about the butterfly theory, which posits that all children of Radic and Marica have a butterfly of their own. Miquella's is the nascent butterfly.
Oh, shit!
Melania's is the Aeonian butterfly. And since Melina is the kindling butterfly, we've long speculated that hers was the smoldering butterfly.
Oh, that actually
Now
makes so much sense.
That butterfly could
Dude, I'm
belong
learning.
to Messmer instead, given his much more overt flame symbolism. That said, there is a fourth pink butterfly.
Do we think we're
featured
going
in
to
the
see
trailer
Miquella
now,
in the
so
DLC?
it's possible the butterfly theory might still have wings.
Funny.
If Messmer was legitimately born alongside the other children of Marica Radigan, that actually places his existence a little bit later in the timeline. Still in the age of the Erdtree, but after Radigan left Renala for Marica. Whatever the case, Messmer would find himself in the Land of Shadow, delivering death.
And we are below 36 hours, guys.
stripped
Good
of
job.
the grace of gold.
Those stripped of
I want to know what this guy is. Like, that design there looks friggin' awesome. Don't get me wrong, I think body horror is like grim as fuck sometimes, but I also think the body horror, when it's done in a very artistic fashion, just looks absolutely ridiculously good.
shall all meet death in the embrace of Messmer's flame.
Since this line is delivered by a third party, it seems there's a common belief here that Messmer's role is to deliver death to those stripped of grace who...
Like, no one can ever deny that Miyazaki and the design team absolutely work wonders with this. There's never a design that seems like it's had not enough thought put into it. Sometimes they reuse concepts, like some of these designs look like some of these designs look like they're very much out of a Souls-like game, like Dark Souls specifically, which, you know, that's fair. And I think that's kind of the element, because Dark Souls is very much based around shadow and darkness. So obviously now that we're going into a shadowy place with darkness and shadow, it kind of makes sense, right?
Find themselves in the Land of Shadow, including...
And I still think this is still in the same universe as Dark Souls. I think this is just Dark Souls 4, but they didn't want to say it was Dark Souls 4.
Mother.
And they're waiting for, like, the biggest amount of hype to be like, Like, one day we're going to get a DLC trailer, and we're going to see one of these guys turn into a fucking Dark Soul, and everyone's going to lose their mind.
So bereft of light.
In this dialogue, I think Messmer is questioning
We are going to do a playthrough with Elden Ring pretty soon, by the way, guys, to get ready for the DLC.
Restore grace to the tarnished and sanction their lordship, guiding them to become Elden Lord, even though in his eyes we are bereft of light. Messmer strikes me as a bit of a rebel and an outcast. He's not what you'd expect from someone who is clearly killing people who have been stripped of the grace of gold. But I do ultimately think that he holds.
I'm gonna have to go back and watch his other Elden Ring videos
regard.
at some point.
I do think he's doing.
Because I know a lot of this, but it's kind of.
The fact that he
I need to
sits
touch up
on
on my
a
lore a bit,
demigod's
I think.
throne might be evidence enough. But in an excellent bit of photo manipulation by user Woosa69 on Reddit, we can clearly spy a statue of what seems to be Marica in the background. It has her signature braid and her armband as well. And uniquely, she's holding a baby.
I wonder if we're going to see Marica in
Could
this
be
still.
Messmer, but
She is like one of the
that's just
overarching
speculation.
figureheads that we never get to actually interact
we know
with.
Marica uses people, even her enemies, even the Blasphemous. She will keep a fire giant alive just so it can watch over something for eternity. She will disguise herself as Radigan.
Like the average Londoner, am I right?
Make her biggest rival fall in love with him and then abandon that rival and undo them from within. She will condemn the misbegotten and then get one of them to craft weapons for a tarnished so that they can become Elden Lord.
Oh, that's right, because he was like one of those like really weird Attack on Titan looking creatures. I completely missed that. Man, I feel sorry for the friggin' blacksmith.
So in a similar way, I feel like Messmer being useful to Marica, despite very clearly being a blasphemous character, really isn't that strange. But what do I mean about Messmer being blasphemous? Well, first, there's the snakes. According to the Gravekeeper cloak, the snake is viewed as a traitor to the Erdtree.
Which makes sense considering the giant, what's his face, the guy you kill with the big old sword spear thing that does the Stormbreaker, the equivalent of fighting Yorm in this game. Oh, bugger, his name eludes me. That guy, you know what I mean. Because he's like one big fucking snake. And he's like the most anti-light person in the entire thing.
And now we don't know if they're talking about Messmer's snake or the Great Serpent, which is what we assumed before.
Can we stop talking about people's snakes? Because
traitor to the Erdtree. And now
I really don't think we should be talking about snakes
Messmer's
when my boy's got a trouser snake of his own. Oh boy! I don't know where the other end of that starts, but I don't think I want to use my imagination.
What we assumed before. Whatever the case, there's no way that Messmer's snakes would be looked upon favorably by the Golden Order. In the Erdtree Colosseums, for example,
or some like horrible body horror them being in his skin.
Seeing the bronze snakes on the armor of the
gladiators
being beaten and battered. And then there's Messmer's usage of flame. According to the Spark aromatic, fire was prohibited to those who served the Erdtree. And while this rule was forgotten as the war drew ever on, I do think Messmer might have some links to the flame of the Fell God, if I had to guess. He's got the red hair, and snakes do appear on the Giant's Flame Forge in the mountaintops, but I'll admit these connections are pretty shaky. We don't know exactly.
Well, and of course, it's all speculation. Sometimes these are just thematic choices that just are convenient.
Lastly, Messmer clearly has a connection to Dragon Communion, which
also, do you want to see? Do you want to just as an interesting little thing I noticed during the entire fight of in the trailer of the player versus Messmer, the player doesn't really land a single strike on Messmer. It is Messmer domineering the entire fight, even when the player pulls out this big old like, I'm an angel now. Even that you don't see land on him. It's kind of to big up how powerful he is, I think.
Messmer clearly has a connection to Dragon Communion, which is also something that's frowned upon.
Not the dragons!
Is the abhorrent
those
act
damn
of
scaly lovers.
The hearts of dragons to commune with the ancient dragons. And
which is also why I think this game is Dark Souls. Dark Souls 3, Dark Souls 2, and Dark Souls 1 has a very big reliance on the idea of dragons being the founders of humanity and the existence. And with such a heavy relevancy, there's even scaleless dragons in every one of them.
More like them. According to the Magma Worm's scale sword,
that was the weapon I beat the game with for the first time.
Is a grave transgression for which many partakers were cursed to crawl on their bellies as shadows of their former selves. As evidence for Messmer's communion, his one good eye is yellow and slitted, which is a clear symptom of consuming the dragon hearts that even our
No, I thought that was just chronic masturbation. Stop touching it or your eyes will go like dragons. But Mom, Melania.
And, not to mention, his winged armor looks a lot like the Drake Knight set, which is a set that labels the Drake Knights as partakers of communion.
Hello
there.
Then
Yo, Zach,
there's this
thank you for
symbol
on the box art, and even the fire he conjures that looks a little bit like the Dragon Communion seal.
A little bit,
it's
I
not
can
a
see it.
one-to-one match. And then serpents themselves are considered imperfect dragons in Dark Souls lore.
Hey, they're trying to be their best. Don't judge my slithery little boys.
Draconic wings, so there could be something there. On this promotional page, we also learn that Messmer's full title is Messmer the Impaler. And
that is such a low-hanging fruit. I'm not even going to touch it.
Could be that this name simply comes from his fighting style, but I will also point out, as many others have already.
Hey,
But there is
Drag,
a
thank you very much for the
catacomb in
resub, dude.
lands between
I have
called the
arrived. What is up,
Impaler's
my
Catacombs.
gamers?
So
For learning.
it's possible he got this reputation from certain deeds that he committed in the lands between. Of all the characters I can think
Oh,
of,
that's
only
actually kinda
the fire
cool.
giants and Marica come to mind as ever being impaled.
I just want to emphasize that I love Marica's design. And without being perv-pilled, this whole concept of like corrupted limbs, there is a reason why most of my characters have somewhat disproportionate body parts, or have some sentiment of like something that can cause their limbs to become slightly more than what they were originally. Like, I love seeing that like tapering. The aesthetic of it is absolutely delightful. Honestly, even outside of being perv-pilled, I adore that. I mean, yes, absolutely 10 out of 10, sexy as fuck. But aesthetically, that's gorgeous. One of my favorite kind of concept designs.
The fire giants'
And again,
stakes.
Look at the color. Color theory at its finest. You got the red in amidst the white, and the golden hue of her hair traipsing off. Her symbology of yellow clashed with the impalement of the red. The red was the antithetical nature of her existence. Shackled by the red, imposed by her golden hue.
Aren't identical to Messmer's spear, but they are similar, and Marica being impaled at the end of the game never really had a good explanation, so maybe this is a chance for them to explain that, finally. So, in conclusion, I get the vibe that Messmer is this rebellious, kind of blasphemous child, but that they're still loyal.
So he has
and,
no relevancy
more
to Melania
importantly,
whatsoever.
Still useful.
I was really
to
hoping we'd
their
get to see
mother,
Melania
who
in
is
this DLC. Again,
Though,
because
of course, all my opinions
porn.
and speculations in this video, especially, are very subject to change. Next, let's talk about Miquella.
I am Melania,
Miquella is many
blessed
things.
blade of Miquella.
He is the demigod son of Queen Marica and her consort Radigan. He
Oh.
is Miquella the Nascent, cursed with eternal youth. He is Miquella the Unalloyed, who sought to find a cure for his sister's scarlet rot. He is Saint Trina, an alter ego who deals in sleep and dreams. And he is Miquella of the Erdtree, a sort of Erdtree that he eventually embedded himself within. He's
Oh,
also
that's
the
grody.
subject of an hour-long lore video on my channel.
See, I would love to go back and watch all these lore videos, but I realized it would take up like 1 billion hours of my time.
And
I've got
I'm also
Helldivers to
going to
play.
be talking about him again later this week in a lore video about Moog, so please
I
forgive
love
me for
Moog,
being brief.
other than
in
the whole,
my
you know, like,
description of
incest
him
part.
here. Suffice to say, though, Miquella is a very important demigod. He's also an Empyrean, which means he is a rare character eligible to become a god.
That sword
and
design is so
succeed
over the
Queen
top,
Marica.
but I am there for it.
Additionally, his sister says that he is the most fearsome Empyrean of all, and that he possesses the wisdom, the allure.
Oh, so
of
that's
God.
his. That's Miquella's
It's this
Melania's
allure
sister. Ah,
that
okay.
has led to his fate in the base game, which is to say,
Mr.
he
Yowie
appears to be
Hands.
dead at the hands of Moog, who is Miquella's demigod half.
That is a big old yaoi hand. Good lord.
Miquella's cocoon out of the Erdtree and abducted him. Now Miquella's
shit,
cocoon
I never-
flesh
okay.
lies in Mogwin Palace, and his withered arm there will become the entrance to the DLC.
Oh, well there you go.
Miyazaki elaborates on this point, stating that
So,
Miquella
good luck, guys. You have to kill Moog to get to the DLC. Not even like the end boss. You have to kill Moog, and just getting to Moog is a pain enough as in of itself. So, good luck with that.
has traveled to the land of shadow for his own reasons, and it's up to the player to follow in his footsteps, as many other NPCs also have before you. The poem reads, "It was to this land that Miquella departed, divesting himself of his flesh, his strength,
I know who
his
that is.
lineage, of all things golden." The fact that Miquella has divested himself of his flesh reminds me a lot of Rani, who slays
My
her
queen! My queen, Rani!
own flesh intentionally in order to free her from the control of the two fingers. Through his own death, it seems, he has departed to the land of shadow, though now he is without his strength. He's also likely divested himself from his great rune, which is probably this one, seen here.
Oh, that's actually really cool.
Takes the same shape as this emote you get for pre-ordering, which is called Ring of Miquella. So all of this should explain.
Yep, dude. You can never deny, even if they're like, even if the videos are really dry, you can never deny that Vati does his research. Like, good lord, I would never have made that connection.
Why he needs you. The poem continues, and now Miquella awaits the return of his promised lord. If I had to guess where we're ultimately headed, it would be the castle here, right beneath the shadow of the Erdtree. Here, an arc. Which, again,
this is also why I can guarantee you this game is not going to be just the size of Limgrave. Because you have to think about verticality and layering. Yes, it might be the general circumference of Limgrave, but how much there is to do up and down within that space is going to be quite subjective.
The bounty of the Erdtree, just like the rune arcs do. And the sky above is enwreathed by these ethereal cloth tapestries.
That's still my favorite design
According to Miyazaki, these tapestries are a veil, and they are a symbol of the land of shadows.
The veil as well is also what gives me credence to thinking this is like its own little pocket dimension, veiled within the shadow of the Erdtree.
Assassins that are invisible due to their concealing veils. And we have a talisman that is a part of those veils, put together from dark cloth with a lustrous sheen that completely hides the wearer's presence.
That assassin. The amount of times I died to him,
about how Marica
just one-shots
was
you every time
for the land of shadow being concealed or veiled.
Yeah, Limgrave ain't even that small.
According to the Black Knife armor, the Black Knives are rumored to be Newman who had close ties with Marica
60
herself.
hours.
So
yeah, so even though the general vicinity is pretty small, comparatively, there's going to be as much to do in this smaller area as there would have been to have done in the entirety of the base game, I think. This is what I was speculating originally. I legitimately think this DLC, it might be generally smaller in overall circumference, but there's going to be so much to do. So much overlapping areas as well. We'll see.
Starting to understand the nature of this veil. That said, the way
how many dungeons do we think there are going to be?
brings to mind a lot of things.
Yes, I love fighting the same boss 7 times in a row.
Then I thought maybe it could represent Mohg's bloody bedchamber.
Also, again, talking about overlapping areas, this area, the island where you fight Mohg, it's tiny, but you can easily spend 10, 20 hours exploring just this one small island. And it's all because of that verticality. Like that, even the path leading up to Mohg, it's a really small area when you look at it from a bird's eye view, but because of how much overlapping and how many caverns there are, overlapping areas, it's a great way of turning a small area into a big exploration.
As he puts it. Or it could even represent the Baldachins of the Deathbed Companions, which, according to the Baldachin's blessings, are hidden temples in the guise of a bedchamber. This could represent Miquella's long-awaited rebirth, or maybe his eternal nascence. It could even represent the fact that he is Saint Trina, an alter ego that has to do...
As a bit of a speculation, I could also see it like this is a miniature area that sort of you delve into that sort of like its own microcosm within the same universe. Like it's there. It's just very small. I don't know, maybe that's everything. I still think the shadow and pocket dimension is a better explanation.
With sleep and dreams. So many things.
I
Speaking of Saint Trina, though, there's a brief shot of a masked character who looks like they're sleeping in a
That looks like the mask
swamp.
that first guy
the
wears.
Droopy flowers in the background might be Saint Trina's lilies, and the purple
He has a similar
haze of
mask
this
as the guy who calls you
swampy
maidenless.
area definitely gives off sleep effect vibes. You might recall when Rani first meets with you in Elden Ring, she does so amidst a mist, which has put Kale and his donkey to sleep nearby.
Ooh.
And the more I think about it, the more I think this encounter might have to do with Miquella. In this moment, Rani gives you the
If we get Rani back, I'll be very happy.
3 wolves, which she says are from Torrent's former master. And considering we see what looks to be Miquella riding Torrent here in the Land of Shadow, I think we can reason that Torrent is Miquella's steed, and thus that Miquella has given you gifts via Rani and favored you ever since the very beginning of the game. But the rabbit hole goes deeper.
Oh my god.
Melina is the one who gives
you need like a
Torrent's
whole
whistle
ass
at the start of the game.
doctorate to understand this game.
We've now learned that Torrent was likely in the Land of Shadow with Miquella. Does that mean that Melina would have ventured to the Land of Shadow to retrieve Torrent from Miquella at some point? Remember, Melina's
Paradox, thank you for the 81 months, dude. Longest sub on the channel, let's go.
So,
Good day,
I really
Makari,
hope
smiley
we learn more
face.
about her story in this place. The fact that she might have traveled
doing
to
Paradox,
a
pretty good to see,
land
dude.
that's enwreathed in Messmer's flame might also explain why she's burned and bodiless, but now I'm just engaging in unhinged speculation.
Yeah, that's
These
very
theories
speculative.
might have got out of hand.
That's
But let me
just
do
a
unhinged
theory.
speculation on one more
Okay,
thing,
theory.
and I want to draw your attention to the fact that we've learned that it's necessary to kill Radahn to access the DLC.
Yes.
That's curious. It seems to hint that his death is essential for events in the Land of Shadow to make sense. Logically, this would be related to the meteor shower that happens after you kill him, right? Because it's in this moment that the fate in the night sky is suddenly let free.
So I just had the biggest old brain fart of my life. But imagine being Radahn. Imagine Radahn being the first checkpoint you need to do to get to the DLC, only to then realize that you still have to kill Mohg, who subjectively would be considered harder, considering how you have to get to him. Oh, yeah. This is why I'm saying that those who plan on doing the DLC, good luck killing two of the hardest bosses in the game. Because really, I think they just presume by the time you get to Mohg that you're gonna be pretty good at the game, considering you've probably beaten the final boss by that point. Just saying.
Radahn on behalf of Miquella when she fought him all those years ago. What's crazy is we still don't
Also,
know
Radahn is still
why
my favorite design for the
Melania
game,
fought Radahn,
except
so
for his
hopefully
stupid-ass
we
donkey.
get an answer for that as well. And of course, most of you won't have to worry about killing Radahn, as your characters are likely already at the end of the story. And speaking of the end of the story, Miyazaki's recent interview reveals that they don't currently have plans to make a second DLC for Elden
shit!
Ring.
So
But
that answers
whatever
my
ending
question
that's
from
coming
earlier.
with Miquella might
So this might be it.
the final one. But that doesn't necessarily mean that it's shaping up to be a good ending with Miquella.
So, in typical Miyazaki fashion, he's gonna leave this as open as a fucking barn door. Closure? Don't know what that is. I guess we're gonna start planning our next Souls-like game, the Barnyard Rock Stool. Yeah. That'll be the next title.
Pure and radiant, he wields love to shrive clean the
God,
hearts
I
of
hope
men.
I doubt they're gonna be able to make something as good as Elden Ring.
There is
Like, they would
nothing
have to do
more
a
terrifying.
lot to make something better than this.
To shrive is to hear confession, to assign penance and absolve.
Because Elden
someone.
Ring was such an
Sounds
innovation on
like
the original
a pretty
concept.
harrowing process, and
Surely
that is a perfect
Bloodborne
match
2?
for Miquella.
Let's get
It's
Bloodborne on
described
PC
as
first, shall we?
benevolent and fearsome. This is that ominous love of Miquella, which is a really unique vibe, and I'm very excited
What I
to
love
see
with
where
is,
things will
even
go.
at this stage, we still
Believe
have
it or
no
not, I've still got
concept
a lot
of who
the
the
trailer to break
overarching
down,
villain
but
is.
First,
No,
I'd
like,
to
core
finally reveal
lore,
This is
story.
the Shadow of the Great Tree, a unique displate design that I wanted to create where you
Oh,
can
that's
flip
really
it upside
cool.
down and get a completely different perspective.
I mean, yes, there is,
There's
but
two prints
still.
in one.
It's
here. So this
the
way,
entire lore in Elden Ring is very ambiguous. Also, I own that, 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 I want to own that.
It's the giant tree with roots snaking
That's
through
sick
the city
looking.
below in the second half. But put the other way, it's a city.
Okay, thank you for the ad, but I'm skipping. Sorry, Barty.
Let me quickfire some observations at you before I go, since there's a lot I couldn't quite fit into the previous parts of the video. First, this is my favorite enemy design in the trailer.
Yes.
Its body is actually made up of 3 or 4 robed humanoid beings.
It looks like
and
Moog.
They're all coordinating together to
Yes, you can kind of see them. They are
this
segmented.
beast.
I thought this was
Just
Moog originally. There's one guy that stood up on another. It's like those this I know what the inspiration is. This is like one of those Chinese New Year dragons that you see them dancing around on each other.
Like the traditional lion dances from Chinese culture.
Yes, there you go.
It's amazingly inspired. According to Miyazaki, there was a culture that existed before the Golden Tree, and the lion dancer is derived from that culture. Next up, this character who sits alone in
It's
a
not
room filled
pre-watched!
with debris.
It's not pre-watched. I'm
over
just
on
smart,
YouTube
okay?
Has acutely noted that they look very much like the scholar who
Oh.
appears upon the carrion inverted statue.
Oh, you're
which is
right.
a key item given to you by Rani
Yeah,
during
no,
her
I remember
quest
this.
line. The area they appear in seems to also feature the many bird cages of Raya Lucaria, so it's exciting to see that we might be learning more about some of the Glintstone sorcerers.
Ooh.
Next, this character wears the deep navy hood of expatriated royalty, and the hood
Again,
was gifted
colour
to
theory.
those who saw the
Blue,
guidance of
opposite of
grace,
red, seen
who
as the
then departed
antithesis.
on missions to faraway lands, from which they would never return. They cast a completely new spell type, and in the background we see lion statues with omen
Ooh,
horns.
okay.
And the fact that these lions with omen horns are venerated might suggest that this was from a time when horns were seen as signifiers of the divine and not symbols of ill omen.
That's what I said earlier, didn't I? I told you. The horns in this were something to show transformation and corruption. That's kind of what I figured. In the way they present themselves, that's what you can kind of entail.
So I was so excited to see this player cast these golden wings. We have many aspects of the Crucible spells, but we could never cast the wings, which until this point were only able to be utilized by the Crucible Knights.
We can roleplay Crucible
And I
Knight,
don't
let's
think that's
go!
the only new Crucible
Also,
spell.
ew! Look at that health bar! As somebody who's just done a zero vigor playthrough of Dark Souls 3, that's disgusting. Play like a real player and don't care about your vigor.
By the Crucible Knights. And I don't think that's the only new Crucible spell we're getting access to. A new screenshot shows the Tarnished using these golden porcupine spines.
That's really
Same
cool looking.
ones utilized by this deformed hippo enemy after it charges.
Hey, now he's just trying his
And
best,
the sound
alright?
it makes is just
He's not
like a
deformed. His mum
Crucible
said he
spell.
looked gorgeous.
But I wonder if this pot thrown by the player character is a spell or a consumable or a weapon art. And speaking of new screenshots, I want to know the story behind this guy. I will
Dude, somebody's gonna put a voice over this guy going, "Oh my god, 3 runes! Yippee!"
protect him with my life. It seems like he appears in this same field of blue flowers, which, if you look carefully, has that grave that has a hole in it that you find.
But wait a minute, that's the same gravestone that was seen in Dark Souls 1 with Artorias, the big old dog person thing. The Dark Souls 1 collab confirmed.
In Morn's castle. There's also, of course, this red dancer character. There are a couple of dancer characters in Elden Ring, so maybe she's related to that. Oh, and I
She
also
looks
adore
a little bit like... She looks a little bit like the weird, crazy people that dance. You know what I'm talking about, right? The fat guy, the long snaky guy. She looks like a much less corrupted version of those guys. And I had this like premonition in my mind that this was their uncorrupted form. And when they got corrupted, their red uniforms got dyed white. At least that's the speculation. Because they have like a similar kind of like flowy movement to their fight, especially with the big long gangly one.
character. There are a couple of dancer characters in Elden Ring, so maybe she's related to that. Oh, and I also adore the design on...
Before, this is the Dark Souls 3 reference, that this was the Boreal Dancer. No! No, I just got done beating the Boreal Dancer! Not again! Not again!
Character. There are a couple of dancer
She even attacks
characters in
like it
Elden
as well.
Ring, so maybe
those
she's
spins.
related to that. Oh, and I also adore the design on
Yes.
this guy,
Yes.
who is attempting this impossible task of wrenching a sort of spinal golden ribcage through a hole in his skull.
That's so cool. I want to know what this is going to look like. I want to know what this boss is going to be. I almost feel like he's going to end up using his own head as a sword. Like, he's going to pull this out of his torso. His head is going to come with it. And his head is going to be on this, like, blade. And he's going to be, like, walking... Because, like, you can kind of see down here, right? Like, he's kneeling down. But I can almost guarantee you that's not the whole thing. I mean, lest we look back at the gaping maw back in Dark Souls 1, where it looks like a very small thing, then it becomes a big thing, and then we all fucking die because we'd never played a Souls-like game before, and that was our first filter, and then we cry about it for 20 hours, and then we get good, and then we beat it, and then we're like, oh wait, that was the easiest boss in the game.
Interested to see what happens after that. And if you look closely at his robes, you'll notice he's actually the same character as the man in this portrait.
Oh!
At another point in the
Oh
trailer.
shit! I didn't even notice.
There's clearly a story here, especially if they're worthy of a portrait, right? Next to this man is a woman who looks a little bit like a deathbed companion. The origins of the deathbed companions were alluded to in the base
yeah,
game, so
Miss
it
Hug you, and
seems
I'm going to give you a
kind of fitting
debuff because
that
you're
we
too much of a
might
tier 3 sub.
Explore those origins.
Also, Miss, yes, she totally got modeled wearing a thong. Miyazaki, you are a beautiful person, and I'm upset you didn't let us wear that underwear as a cosmetic.
Further in the land of shadow, but who knows? I also wonder if this enemy could be a Knight of Radahn. They use gravitational magic, as a lot
Oh,
of
that's
these
not even a
knights do.
horse. That's like a
They're also
boar.
armored somewhat similarly, and they ride a boar, and Radahn's helmet has boar-like tusks.
Okay,
so
now you're reaching.
that might be a thing, but there's just too much to speculate over. Could this armor be related
And
to
this,
Knight?
ladies and gentlemen, is a one-for-one guide on how you turn a simple 3-minute trailer into 50 minutes of complete and utter mid-roll bait.
It's cavalry. This Twitter user points out
Also,
that Messmer...
how you go from making somebody else's video about a 3-minute trailer into a 50-minute clickbait mid-roll bait video into a 1 hour and 10-minute long react Andy of somebody else's video reacting to a 3-minute...
statue looks a lot like the pose of the Cleanrot Knight.
Yes, this is what I mentioned.
Is there a reason for that? Could these black knights with gold trim be related to Malakath? Are the people who are wearing masks part of House Makari? Why is the top of this castle blackened and disintegrating into the sky?
Because it's a shadow
Why is there a
realm, you
line
fool.
of birds standing before you in this swamp? Is this
Oh god, they're just standing there menacingly.
character afflicted by frenzy? Are they a worm face?
Oh.
Their posture is kind of similar. Are we
Oh,
getting
yeah.
rune bear communion spells? And a huge question, why does Messmer only have one functioning eye?
And why
So
does he
many
look like
questions, but I guess
Melania?
it'll have to wait. Subscribe for more Elden
Also,
Ring
Vor.
lore in the
Vor. Why
coming
is there
weeks,
Vor? What is
and
Miyazaki's
subscribe
obsession
to
with
keep up
Vor?
with all the biggest news regarding the DLC.
Wow, wow,
Thank you to
wow.
Miss
Well, I feel like I had more questions than I came in this with, but hey, a Vardy video is always good, and we have learnt much. If you guys have any speculations on how this is going to be, what it's going to be about, please let me know in the comments below. If you want me to watch more of these about like Dark Souls 3 lore, whatever else, because I'd love to learn with you guys. Let me know. I'll see how this video does in terms of views and such, and I'll kind of use that as a gauge as to whether you want me to see more about this kind of lore. In any case, I will catch you all in the next video. Have a good night. Be well. Be awesome. Like the video. Go and watch the original. Subscribe to Vardy Video and hydrate, I guess. Bye.